The morning of May 31st, 2025, was no different from any other in Seoul. The sky was overcast, a hazy gray blanket above a city that never stopped moving. In the heart of the city, the Line 2 subway, a circular loop that connected the major districts, was packed with early commuters. Office workers, students, tourists, and elderly residents filled the sleek train cars, staring into phones, dozing, or whispering over coffee-stained breath. Among them sat Min Jun, a quiet 29-year-old graphic designer. He had headphones in, a half-eaten breakfast sandwich in hand, and a sense of dread he couldn't explain. It wasn't unusual. He'd been anxious lately. He told himself it was just the deadlines, the heat, the crowds. He had no idea he was about to live through a nightmare that would scar him for life. 8:51 a.m. The subway car halted at City Hall Station, and more passengers piled in. One of them was a man no one would have paid attention to except for the smell. He was about 50, balding, wearing a black surgical mask. He carried a plastic grocery bag in one hand, bulging with something heavy. He shuffled to a corner near the doors and stood completely still. Min Jun noticed him only for a second because of that smell. It was chemical, sharp, almost like thinner or gasoline. But in a subway, with hundreds of people packed together, strange smells weren't uncommon. Then came the click. Lighter sparked. Someone screamed. The fire erupted with terrifying speed. In seconds, the bag at the man's feet burst into an inferno of blue-orange flames shooting upward like a geyser. The man didn't flinch. He stepped into the fire. Passengers shrieked, stumbling back. Someone smashed the emergency button. The flames licked the ceiling of the car, catching onto seat cushions and people's clothes. The air turned black with acrid, choking smoke, thick as tar. Within seconds, screams turned into hacking coughs and cries for help. Min Jun's instincts kicked in. He dropped to the floor, where the air was thinner, grabbed the hand of a woman next to him, who was frozen in shock, and began crawling toward the far door. The train hadn't moved, and the doors weren't opening. The automated system locked the train for a few seconds, too long waiting for clearance from the conductor. But inside, seconds were deadly. The fire, now fueled by plastics and human panic, surged. Flames engulfed half the car. Those in the back tried to break the windows. One man threw his laptop. Another used an umbrella. Glass cracked, but didn't shatter. The emergency hammers, for some, were out of reach or missing. Min Jun could barely breathe. His lungs burned. The woman he was trying to help collapsed. He grabbed her by the collar and dragged her, praying the next car had an open door. Then it did. A young student from the next car had opened the connection door manually, waving people through. Only a few managed to crawl out before the fire sealed the path behind them. By 8:59 a.m., emergency services had received the first call. The Seoul Fire Department dispatched multiple units, but the chaos underground made access difficult. Smoke had flooded not just one car, but much of the tunnel, pushing through ventilation systems. Station staff began evacuating platforms. The sound of alarms, boots, and panicked voices echoed through the concrete passages. Firefighters in breathing gear descended the stairwells. The temperature underground was nearing 300 degrees Celsius in the worst pockets. When they reached the car, what they found resembled something from a war zone. End of Part 1. Part 2. Ashes and Shadows. His name was Kang Dae-Hyan. He had no job. No family nearby. No visitors. He lived alone in a third-floor studio apartment in Mapo-jiu. Walls stained with yellow cigarette smoke, garbage bags stacked like furniture. A decade ago, he'd been a civil servant. But after a corruption scandal, a prison sentence, and years of bitterness, he was left with nothing but time and rage. The week before the incident, Kang had purchased a bottle of pink thinner. box of matches, and 2 cans of lighter fluid from a corner store. He told the clerk he was renovating. He wasn't. He posted online, on obscure forums, about how society had turned its back on men like him. He used phrases like cleansing fire and waking them up. The night before the attack, he wrote one last note on an old receipt. They think they're safe, but fire sees all. And fire doesn't forget. No one saw it until it was too late. By 9:07 a.m., firefighters had begun to clear bodies. Some survivors were found curled under seats, others near broken windows. Unconscious from smoke inhalation. Minjun was among the lucky ones. The girl he'd tried to save, her name was Jisoo, was alive, though burned badly on her arms. He sat beside her on the station floor, coughing up black phlegm, his vision swimming, ears ringing. The air outside felt surreal, too bright, too clean, too normal. He looked around and saw others vomiting, weeping, screaming into phones. One woman wandered barefoot, her face smeared with soot, asking, "Where's my son?" He was in the next car. He was just here. Did you see him? Nobody had. By 9:40 a.m., news outlets had caught wind of the explosion. The first headline read, "Fire breaks out on subway line 2. Casualties unknown." 10 minutes later, footage surfaced. Someone had recorded smoke pouring out of the city. Hall station entrance. Within the hour, Korean news channels ran continuous coverage. Social media exploded. Videos, cries for help, blurry photos of survivors lying on the pavement. Hashtags like hashtag Seoul subway fire, hashtag City Hall inferno, and hashtag Line 2 horror trended worldwide. What the media didn't show, what most never saw, was the true horror inside. The blackened walls, the melted seat frames, the man who had burned to death, holding his briefcase, as if waiting to get off at the next stop. By evening, the official report came in. 11 confirmed dead, dozens injured, many in critical condition. The arsonist, Kong, had died at the center of the fire. His body was unrecognizable, identified later through dental records. The fire had consumed him and nearly 100 others. But numbers didn't show the human loss. Not really. Not the child who now feared tunnels. Not the grandmother whose burns would never heal. Not Min Jun, who would wake up gasping for air weeks after, reliving the moment the door wouldn't open. In the weeks that followed, the City Hall station was closed for repair. A temporary memorial was built outside. Flowers, letters, and photos taped to a board where commuters used to read train times. People whispered that they could still smell smoke in the walls. One janitor quit after reporting that he heard screaming in the tunnels even when no train was running. There were rumors, too, that the ghost of the arsonist wandered the station during the early hours, that he whispered to those who stood too long alone. A woman claimed her phone, while on the platform, began playing crackling fire sounds, even though no apps were open. Most said it was stress, trauma, mass psychosis. Min Jun wasn't sure. All he knew was that he never took line 2 again. Min Jun began therapy. He struggled with survivor's guilt. He saw Jisoo once more in the hospital. Her bandaged hands shook as she thanked him. She didn't remember much. Neither did he. He was offered interviews. He declined all of them. But one night, 2 months after the fire, he took a late walk and passed the rebuilt station. It looked exactly the same. To the same. He walked to the edge of the steps, where it descended into the underworld of trains and echoes. And there, he paused. He could swear he smelled it again, just faintly, thinner. Smoke, burning plastic, or maybe that was just memory. End of part 2. Part 3. The things that stay in the weeks after the attack. Seoul tried to move on, but smoke has a way of settling into places it doesn't belong. It crept into the psyche of the city. Children who had never set foot on Line 2 suddenly cried when their parents guided them underground. Transit workers resigned in clusters, many citing nightmares, unexplained panic, or bad feelings near City Hall Station. Even commuters who had escaped unharmed found themselves checking for exits. More often, some stood near the doors the entire ride. Others stopped riding trains altogether. Sales of bicycles, scooters, and rideshare memberships skyrocketed in the weeks after. No one said it out loud, but it was clear the subway was no longer trusted. Nation's grief soon turned to anger. How did no one catch him? Why was the emergency system so delayed? Why didn't the train doors open faster? News anchors grilled transit officials live on air. Social media users shared maps of fire extinguisher placements, pointing out their inaccessibility. There were protests at Seoul Metro HQ. A mother stood outside with a sign. "My son was in car 3. He died waiting for a door to open." The president issued a national apology. The Transit Authority pledged reforms. New AI-driven fire detection systems, better emergency protocols, more staff at platforms, cameras, hammers, sprinklers. Too late. Too late, said many. As summer arrived, rumors multiplied. A viral post on a Korean ghost forum claimed, at 8:51 a.m. each Friday, if you stand on City Hall platform and look down the track, you'll see a second train coming. It never arrives. It just burns. Another post, allegedly from a subway mechanic. I've reset the cameras in that tunnel 5 times. They glitch every night at the same time stamp. 8:59 a.m. footage turns black, then fire, then static. Some said they saw the figure of a man on the platform holding a grocery bag, unmoving. When guards approached, he was gone. But the smell of gasoline lingered. Others, including a few conductors, quit after hearing screams in their headset systems, unprompted, garbled, but unmistakable. Were they hoaxes? Delusions? Maybe, but even the most skeptical citizens avoided that part of the line during early morning hours. Just in case. Min Jun returned to work by July. His coworkers avoided the topic, but he saw how they looked at him, like he carried something back from that day. And he had burn scars on his right hand, panic attacks in elevators. Dreams, always the same, a subway door, a lighter click, smoke pressing in. He began painting again. What emerged on canvas was disturbing faceless commuters, tunnels stretching into blackness, burning silhouettes. He wasn't trying to be dark. It was all he could see. One night, unable to sleep, he sat at his window with a cup of cold tea and asked out loud, "Why did I survive?" No answer came, but a distant siren sounded, and for a second he swore he smelled something faint and awful on the wind. Thinner, burning plastic. 3 months after the fire, an investigative journalist named Hai Rin published a series of articles on the attack. Her findings were chilling. Kang Dae-hyeon had previously attempted self-immolation in 2019, but was never hospitalized. He'd been reported to authorities 3 times by neighbors who feared he was stockpiling chemicals. One of his forum posts included a veiled threat directed at subway lines. All reports had been archived. No action was taken. The system had failed again and again. The public was outraged, but it didn't bring anyone back. It didn't clean the air. It didn't silence the whispers in the tunnels. May 31st, 2026. 1 year later. City Hall Station was brighter now. The walls repainted, the air purifiers upgraded, the staff more alert. But people still hesitated on that platform. They still looked down the tunnel with unease. At exactly 8:51 a.m., a moment of silence was held. Trains stopped for 60 seconds. Commuters stood still, and underground, for just a moment, it was silent. No metal screech. No footsteps, only memory. Only loss. And somewhere, maybe just beneath the floor, something breath. Min Jun took the train again. For the first time in nearly a year, he chose a different line. Sat near the emergency exit. Kept one hand on the hammer. He watched the people. Heads down, phones lit, all so normal. Yet everyone a little different. A little more alert. As the train dove into the tunnel, he glanced at his reflection in the window. And for just a second, he thought he saw another face behind his. Older, ash-covered, eyes staring straight into his soul. But the train rattled, the lights flickered, and it was gone.